Your ritual doesn't fail in the morning, it fails quietly. Later, by afternoon, something shifts. Not dramatically, not enough for you to panic, just enough to leak. You wake up aligned, you affirm, you visualize, you feel calm, centered, certain. And then, life taps you on the shoulder, a notification, a number that hasn't changed, a delay that feels personal, a silence where movement was expected. And suddenly, without realizing it, you're no longer being wealthy. You're checking if it worked. That's the moment everything cracks. Not because the method is wrong, not because you fell out of alignment, but because you slipped into a habit so normal, so socially accepted, that no one questions it. You start negotiating with reality. You look, you react, you look again. And with every glance, every internal flinch, every silent, "Why isn't this here yet?" you exit the state. This is why your results collapse by afternoon, not because your morning routine lacks power, but because your state is leaking through a hidden habit you were never taught to notice. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Prosperity is not fragile, but states are. They don't shatter. They dissolve, quietly, through repetition. And the most dangerous repetition isn't negative thinking, it's monitoring. Watching the 3D to decide how you feel next, letting external movement, or the lack of it, assign meaning. Bargaining internally with time, money, and outcomes. This video is not about motivation. It's not about doing more techniques. It's about stopping one behavior that instantly collapses the wealth state, no matter how good your affirmations are. And more importantly, it's about what to do the moment it happens. A replacement, a script, a reset, something fast enough to use in real life, at your desk, in your car, in the middle of the day, when the old reflex tries to pull you back into scarcity, because the goal is not to stay positive. The goal is to remain seated in the state. And once you understand what's actually breaking the ritual, you'll realize something relieving. You were never blocked. You were just leaking attention. Let's name it clearly, because what you can name, you can interrupt. The enemy is not doubt. It's not fear. It's not even impatience. It's a loop, a quiet, socially normal, almost invisible loop that runs in the background of your day. I call it the 3D bargaining loop. It has 3 steps, and most people repeat them dozens of times without realizing it. First, checking, second, reacting, third, rechecking, and every time the loop completes, your state weakens. Here's how it starts. You've already done the work. You affirmed, you imagined, you felt the relief, you decided, but instead of remaining in the decision, you go back to the world of effects to see if it agrees. You open the app, you glance at the inbox, you refresh the page, you scan your surroundings. Not out of curiosity, but out of measurement. You're asking the 3D a question it can't answer yet. And when the answer isn't what you want, step 2 happens automatically. You react. Sometimes it's obvious. Tension, disappointment, frustration. Sometimes it's subtle. A micro sigh, a tightening in the chest, a mental note that says, "Okay, still not here." That reaction seems harmless, but internally, something just shifted. You went from owner to observer, from chooser to waiter, from I have to, I'm watching. Then comes step 3. You recheck, not immediately, but later, after another affirmation, after another attempt to feel better, after another inner pep talk. You look again, and this is where bargaining begins. Your mind quietly says things like, maybe I need to affirm more, maybe I did it wrong, maybe it's coming later, maybe I should tweak the routine. Notice what's happening. You're no longer living from the end. You're negotiating with the middle. This loop trains the nervous system into scarcity, not because money is missing, but because authority is. The 3D becomes the decider, the validator, the judge, and the moment the external world gets promoted to decision maker, the wealth state collapses. Not dramatically, gradually, because wealth consciousness is not about ignoring reality, it's about not consulting it for permission. The loop feels responsible, logical, adult, but energetically it's saying, I will believe once I see. I will relax once it shows up. I will be wealthy once conditions agree. And that's the habit. Not thinking negatively, not missing a technique, but bargaining with appearances instead of remaining loyal to the assumption. The 3D bargaining loop doesn't show up during meditation. It shows up in motion, in ordinary moments, between tasks, in the gaps of your day when you're not consciously doing the work. That's why it's so effective. Let me walk you through 3 real-life triggers where the wealth state most commonly collapses, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're reacting automatically. Trigger 1, the bank app. You open it without thinking. Not because you need to move money, not because there's an action required. You're just checking. The number is the same, or lower, or unchanged in a way that feels personal. And in less than a second, an inner shift happens. Your body tightens. Your mind starts calculating. Your attention drops from ownership into monitoring. Even if you affirm right after, the damage is already done, not to your desire, but to your seat in the state. Because in that moment, you didn't relate to money as something responding to you. You related to it as something you were waiting on. Trigger 2, the late payment or delay. You were expecting movement, a transfer, a message, a confirmation. It doesn't arrive when you thought it would. And your mind fills the silence with meaning. Maybe something went wrong. Maybe they forgot. Maybe I misjudged this. Notice, nothing actually happened. No bad news, no rejection, just no update. But absence gets interpreted as evidence. You start replaying timelines, reevaluating assumptions, mentally adjusting expectations, just to be realistic. That's bargaining. You're not responding to facts, you're responding to lack of confirmation. And in doing so, you step out of the fulfilled identity and into the role of someone waiting for reassurance. Trigger 3, slow progress. This one is subtle. You're not broke, you're not failing, you're just not moving fast enough. So you start tracking, measuring. Comparing today to yesterday, this week to last week, progress becomes a scoreboard instead of a byproduct. And the moment you measure to decide how you feel, you've outsourced your state. Wealth consciousness doesn't rush. It doesn't chase proof. It doesn't ask, is it working yet? That question alone tells you where you're standing. Here's the key realization. These triggers don't create scarcity. They reveal it. They show you where your attention still goes for certainty. And that's good news, because once you can see the exact moment the loop activates, you can interrupt it, not with force, but with replacement. In the next chapter, I'll give you the replacement protocol, not theory, not philosophy. You don't break a habit by fighting it. You break it by replacing the role it serves. The 3D bargaining loop exists for one reason only, to restore a sense of certainty. When you check, you're not trying to sabotage yourself. You're trying to feel safe. So the replacement must give you certainty faster than the loop does, without consulting the 3D. This protocol has 3 parts. It takes 60 seconds total, and it works because it moves you back into authority, not hope, not positivity. Authority. Part 1, the 10-second interrupt. The moment you notice yourself checking, worrying, or mentally negotiating, you stop the narrative with a single line, not out loud. Internally. This is not evidence. This is old momentum. That's it. You're not denying reality. You're reclassifying it. You're reminding your nervous system that what you're seeing is a lag, not a verdict. Say it once, slowly, with finality. Don't argue. Don't explain. Interrupt the meaning, not the sensation. Part 2, the 30-second inner conversation script. Now you replace the bargaining voice with an ownership voice. Use this tone, calm, neutral, certain, like someone who already knows how this plays out. Internally, say, I don't check to see if it's working. I check because I forgot who's deciding. I decide first. Movement follows. I'm already seated in the outcome. Let the words land. This isn't affirmation. It's orientation. You're placing yourself back inside the state instead of staring at it from the outside. If the mind tries to argue, don't wrestle it. Just repeat the final line. I'm already seated in the outcome. Once, clean, done. Part 3. The 20-second breath and posture anchor. States live in the body, so you seal the reset physically. Drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, sit or stand a little taller. Not rigid, just settled. Take one slow breath in through the nose, long exhale through the mouth. As you exhale, feel yourself stop leaning forward internally. No reaching, no waiting, just presence. That's the protocol. You didn't force belief. You didn't visualize. You didn't fix the world. You simply reclaimed your seat. And here's the important part. This works only if you use it at the moment of trigger, not later in meditation. Because wealth isn't built in isolation. It's maintained in interruption. This is what you use when the loop doesn't just tap you. It pulls. When the number hits harder, when the delay feels louder, when the old identity tries to reclaim the seat, you don't analyze, you don't negotiate, you run the drill. 60 seconds, no more. First 15 seconds, stop the spiral. Wherever you are, desk, car, hallway, you pause, not physically frozen, internally, and you say once, I already chose, I'm not choosing again. That line matters, because spirals happen when you keep redeciding. This stops the redecision. Next 20 seconds, return to identity. Now you speak from being, not wanting, internally, calmly. I'm the version of me who doesn't track this. I don't watch money to feel safe. Money responds to me, not the other way around. No emotion required. Certainty doesn't shout. Let the words orient you back into position, like sitting back into a familiar chair. Next 15 seconds, sensory grounding. Pick one physical sensation, the weight of your body on the chair, your feet on the floor, the temperature of the air. Stay with it. This anchors the state in the present moment, not the imagined future. Wealth is now, not later. Final 10 seconds, seal it, one breath, and this line, return complete. That's it. You don't look for relief. You don't scan for change. You move on with your day as the one who already returned. Here's why this works. States persist when they're resumed quickly. Most people fall out of the wealth state for hours. Not because of big events, but because they don't know how to return. This drill shortens the gap, not tomorrow, not in meditation, now. And every time you return faster, the old habit weakens. Because the brain learns, we don't live there anymore. A state doesn't need protection, it needs placement. Most people try to hold the wealth state all day. That creates tension. Instead, you schedule returns. You assume drift will happen, and you plan for it. This is how people who live in stable prosperity actually operate, not by vigilance, by rhythm. There are two windows where the 3D bargaining loop is most active: midday, evening. So that's where you integrate the reset, not reactively, but deliberately. Midday, the authority check. Somewhere between late morning and early afternoon, pause. Not because something went wrong, but because this is when momentum from the morning meets external input, emails, numbers, conversations, movement. You don't wait for a trigger. You run a light version of the reset, about 30 seconds. Internally, I'm not here to see if it's working. I already chose the outcome this morning. I stay seated. One breath, posture reset, then you continue. This prevents the loop before it starts. Evening, the detachment seal. Evenings are dangerous, not because of stress, but because of review. This is when people replay the day. What happened? What didn't? What should have moved by now? That review either locks in the state or reinforces scarcity. So before the day ends, you run the reset again. Calm, slow, internally. Nothing today had authority over my state. What I chose remains chosen. I release the day. Then you stop thinking about money. That's important. Wealth consciousness knows when not to focus. This isn't avoidance, it's confidence. Why this works? States stabilize through re-entry, not force. Every time you consciously return, midday and evening, you teach your system something new. We don't bargain here, we don't monitor, we don't chase confirmation. And over time, the old habit fades, not because you suppressed it, but because it's no longer useful. The wealth state becomes the default, not a performance. If there's one thing to take from this, let it be this. You don't lose money states because you're negative. You lose them because you check. Because you look to the world of effects and ask it how to feel next. And the moment you stop doing that, not once, but habitually, something settles. You stop leaning forward internally. You stop bracing. You stop negotiating. Wealth stops feeling like something to reach. It starts feeling like a position you occupy. That's the real shift. Not more affirmations, not longer routines, but fewer moments of surrendering authority. Every time you interrupt the loop, every time you run the reset, every time you return without drama, you are training a new identity, one that doesn't flinch at numbers, one that doesn't rush timelines, one that doesn't bargain with silence. And from that identity, movement becomes normal, unforced, quiet, expected. If this resonated, let it mark a decision, not an emotion. Like this video if you recognized yourself in the loop. Subscribe if you want practical, state-based work instead of surface motivation. And comment the word "seated" if you're done checking and ready to stay in the state. In the next video, I'll give you a 60-second SAT script you can use tonight. A precise imaginal sequence designed to lock this wealth state in while you sleep, so tomorrow doesn't start from hope, but from position. Until then, remain seated.